Hello, people. Big surprise. I've finished a book. The title is Reef Madness. Charles Darwin, Alexander Agassiz, and the Meaning of Coral. That's Reef Madness, not Reefer Madness. This is another book that came out of my reject pile, and oddly enough, it was bookmarked. I had a page marked just about the same as the last one. I think the last one was on page 29. This one was on page 31. I don't know why I stopped reading it. Probably because I really don't read natural history anymore. I went through a big phase of my life where, like a 5-6 year period where that's all I read was natural history. This book was pretty cool. It got very interesting. It all takes place in the 1800s, of course, because that's when those two gentlemen were alive. And there's a lot of other scientists, geographers, many people in this book, that were pioneering in their fields. And, people at this time knew what coral was. They knew that it was tiny little animals building upon each other. They just didn't know why some areas of the ocean had coral and some didn't. I mean, they knew that the water needed to be warm. They knew it needed to be, near the equator. But what led to this gigantic thing of coral in the middle of the ocean that might plummet on each side? How the hell did they grow that high? And it really goes into Alexander Agassiz a lot more than anything. His entire life, and his father, Louis Agassiz. It goes into both their lives. Louis had a big running feud with Darwin and with Huxley and all of Darwin's supporters. Louis was kind of like, he would actually study things and go out in the field, but at the end of it all, Louis thought that we were studying the mind of God. And Louis ended up kind of being made a fool of by not so much by Darwin. Darwin wasn't too much for the spotlight, but by Darwin's supporters. And even before Darwin came up with the theory of evolution, he came up with this theory about why coral grew where it grew. And his theory was, it was all, based on, most of it anyway, was based on subsidence, like land that is falling away, volcanoes underneath the surface of the ocean that at one point were close enough to the surface to encourage the growth of coral, and then began to subside, which would lead to the coral continuing to grow, and you having these, very thick sediments that are nothing but old dead coral with a live outside. Let's get to my notes. It's page 62 of a 265-page book, and I don't think the word reef has been mentioned more than once. It was mentioned once. Louis Agassiz studied some corals in Florida. And by the way, I had to Google how you pronounce Agassiz. There's a Z at the end of that name, but apparently you don't pronounce it, depending on where you are. Oh, this is in the 1800s. I've already mentioned that. But since we're in a pandemic right now, I thought I might mention that, these people's lives were often interrupted by tragedy, where somebody, their wife, their kids, might die of cholera, yellow fever, flu, typhus, typhoid fever, and scarlet fever. We go from page 62 all the way to page 124 before coral is even mentioned again. Now I'm going to do some reading. Third paragraph of 133. This looks like it's something that I don't know. No, I'm looking at 133, 132. 1, 2, 3. This first volume of the Principles was a gift from Captain Fitzroy. Fitzroy is the captain of the Beagle. Fitzroy later regretted it intensely. The captain was so conservative that he had almost rejected Darwin for the naturalist post when he heard he was a Whig. He was also an evangelical Christian, and he was so appalled when Darwin published his evolutionary theory in 1859 that he became a vociferous and prominent critic. The tension from maintaining this public opposition to his old friend helped drive him mad. In 1865, he killed himself by slitting his throat. I don't know why I find that funny, but bottom of 233. This book got much better as I went along. Much better. I bet you this thing sat on my shelf, I don't know, for 10 years. Excuse me. Okay, I was waiting for that because there's always two. Fucking retard neighbor. What I never like. Who is this again? I can't remember who this is, but maybe I'll remember while I'm reading. What I never like in the South Pacific is to see the swell houses. This is Alexander Agassiz. What I never like in the South Pacific is to see the swell houses, comparatively speaking, of the missionaries. They always, in all the islands, have the very best of everything, and certainly don't show the natives any example of plain living, for they are most comfortable and have no end of servants. I have been reading M-N, apparently an advocate for the missionary cause, and such twaddle passes my comprehension. It is nothing but an apology to join the European band of robbers in despoiling the barbarians, as we are pleased to call them, and compelling them to buy our goods and wares in addition to stealing their land, all in the name of spreading civilization, just as the missionary swindles in the South Seas, who trades with natives, makes a lot of rules for them adapted to our uses, and compels them to do as we think right, all in the name of Christianity. And if they resist, the missionary claims the protection of a man of war of his country. What fun it would be for a man of energy and pluck to come among the islands and help them to resist such aggressions. Remember now that Alexander's father was a very religious man, and here he is, writing that about the missionaries. He really did not like the missionaries. In fact, he seems to, they don't print any of them here, but he seems to have fantasized in some of his letters to his friends and family about violently resisting these missionaries. I have a note here, the Michigan connection. Alexander had a mine in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a copper mine, and he made tons of money off of this thing. He even ran the thing. He even went there and managed it. So he was not a stupid person. 249. What the hell? $249. is a 1911 excerpt from the Encyclopedia Britannica. It must be admitted that the subsistence theory of Darwin is inapplicable to a large number of coral reefs and islands. In the present state of our knowledge, it seems reasonable to conclude that coral reefs are formed wherever the conditions suitable for growth exist, whether in areas of subsidence, elevation, or rest. And the atoll or barrier reef shape is not necessarily evidence of formation during subsidence, but may be produced by the natural growth of coral, modified by the action of waves and currents in regions in which subsidence has certainly not taken place. Then I got bottom of 254. All the zingers are at the very end of this book. This is kind of a long one. Hopefully this isn't too boring. One of the things that they were missing, Alexander and Darwin died way before Alexander did, was the chance to drill way down in these things. Because if you could drill way down into a coral reef and find out that 1,000 feet of it was coral, and coral only lives, it's got to be close to the surface, then you would say, damn, maybe Darwin was right about this subsistence thing. The chance to drill deep finally came in 1950. The U.S. Navy, preparing to test nuclear bombs on several atolls in the Marshall Islands, assembled a team of reef geologists to do some deep core drilling as part of an elaborate pre-test environmental survey of the area. The geologists, led by the United States Geological Survey's Harry Ladd, who with Hofmeister had advocated an Agassizian antecedent platform theory since the 1930s, set up drills at opposite ends of Eniwetok, a circular atoll at the Marshall's western edge. Drilling technology had advanced since Funafuti. The drills cut through the limestone with relative ease, bringing up 1.5-inch cores. The results must have been sobering for Ladd and any other subsistence doubters present. The first cores were clearly reef rock, as expected. As the drill passed the first few hundred feet and out of coral reef depth, the cores changed little. They still appeared to be reef rock. Both the immediate shipboard and later laboratory analysis found that the granular stone held fossils of foraminifera, corals, and other life that grew only in shallow water, confirming that this was coral limestone. So it went as the drills cut deeper, 500 feet, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Finally, at 4,200 feet, the drills hit what was unequivocally basement, a greenish basalt, the volcanic mountain on which the reef had originated. Dating of the tiny fossils in the bottommost layer of coral showed that the reef had gotten its start in the Eocene. For more than 30 million years, this reef had been growing, an inch every millennium, on a sinking volcano, thickening as the lava beneath it subsided. Darwin was right. Agassiz, wrong. The guy spends most of the book trying to convince you that Darwin was the one that was wrong. And here, like in the last 10, 15 pages of the book, not that Darwin's theory covers all coral, but it covers a hell of a lot of them. And I got 259. First paragraph. This is in the epilogue. That Alexander Agassiz did not publish his coral reef theory. Agassiz kind of spent his life trying to destroy Darwin's theory. Did not publish his coral reef theory, that this most effectual of scientists and administrators, a man who completed countless projects started by both his father and himself, accustomed and even compelled to finish things, should fail to complete the most consuming work of his life, constitutes an irony of the sort usually reserved for scripted tragedy. It's only one among a long list of ironies painful to contemplate that Alex, taking up a question seemingly made for him, should find himself locked in the endless struggle with a man who destroyed his father. That every lesson Alex learned watching his father's destruction, his aversion to idealist thought and deductive method, his devotion to induction, his resistance to early conclusions or simple answers, his distaste for debate, should hamper him in his own battle with Darwin. That his conflict with Darwin should form a near mirror image of his father, only this time with Darwin holding the lovely story and Alex the deep box of empirical ammunition, but Darwin winning anyway, that he should overlook the implications that his father's Ice Age theory held for reef formation, and that those implications should be seen and published by another even as he died. It was a really good book. I realized as I read it that I didn't know anything about coral reefs, and that it would be very nice to be independently wealthy and just sail around the world studying coral reefs. I don't know. It'd probably be too hot for me. Thanks for watching.